The moment someone realizes how much you need them, something changes. Not dramatically, not with words, but something shifts in how they see you, and you can feel it even when you cannot name it. Most people spend their lives chasing the feeling of being fully known by someone, fully seen, fully needed in return. What Machiavelli understood is that need, when worn on the outside, does not create closeness. It creates leverage. And leverage in the hands of someone who did not ask for it and did not earn it is one of the most dangerous positions a person can occupy. You have been there before. The conversation where you said too much. The message you sent twice before receiving a reply. The moment you revealed how badly you needed someone to stay and watched something in their posture quietly change. You felt it. You just did not have a name for what happened. What happened was a transfer, invisible, silent, and permanent until you understand the mechanism behind it. Human beings do not consciously decide to value things less when they become certain. It happens below awareness, below language, below intention. The moment something feels guaranteed, the brain recalibrates its worth. This is not cruelty. This is architecture. The same mechanism that makes scarcity drive desire makes certainty quietly reduce it. And most people hand certainty to others for free. They hand it over through constant availability, through messages that arrive before the previous one was answered, through conversations where one person is clearly more invested than the other and makes no effort to conceal it, through the look in someone's eyes that says, "I would collapse without you," and mistakes that vulnerability for love. Machiavelli observed courts filled with people performing devotion, performing loyalty, performing care. And he noticed something the performers never did. The more desperately someone needed approval, the less seriously they were taken, not because the prince decided to disrespect them, because desperation signals something about a person's internal state that no amount of performance can override. It signals that the external world controls them, and people who are controlled by external approval can be moved by whoever supplies it. That is not a position of connection. That is a position of vulnerability dressed as devotion. Think about the friendships where you gave more than you received, where you initiated most conversations, where you rearranged your life around someone who rarely rearranged anything for you. You told yourself it was loyalty. You told yourself it was love. But underneath the justification was something smaller and more honest. You were afraid that if you stopped giving, they would stop staying. And that fear, not affection, was driving the behavior. Machiavelli would have identified that immediately, because fear-driven generosity and genuine care produce identical behavior on the surface, but they produce entirely different internal experiences and different long-term outcomes. The person acting from fear gives and keeps score silently. They give and wait for reciprocity that does not arrive. They give until they are empty and then feel resentment they cannot fully explain, because they never admitted to themselves that the giving was conditional, that it was a transaction they never announced, that underneath the generosity was a need so large that it was running the entire relationship without permission. The person on the receiving end may not consciously recognize this, but they feel it, something slightly off in the dynamic, something that feels less like warmth and more like weight, less like closeness and more like quiet pressure to behave in a specific way, to text back, to show up, to provide the validation the other person has silently made essential to their emotional stability. And people resist invisible pressure, not loudly. They resist it by slowly creating distance they will never fully explain. This is what emotional overexposure actually costs. Not the relationship itself, not always, but the quality of the dynamic, the ease of it, the reciprocity that only exists when both people feel free rather than obligated. Now consider how this pattern begins long before friendships and relationships enter the picture. It begins inside families, inside the first rooms most people ever occupied. The child who learned that love was conditional on performance, who learned that approval had to be earned through behavior rather than simply received through presence. That child grows into an adult who does not know how to exist in relationships without working for their place in them, without constantly proving they deserve to stay, without scanning every interaction for signs that they are about to be removed. And that adult carries those patterns into every connection they ever form, into friendships where they give endlessly hoping nobody notices the silent accounting underneath, into relationships where they become whoever the other person needs them to be because their own shape was never treated as enough, into workplaces where they seek approval from authority figures with an urgency that has nothing to do with professional ambition and everything to do with an old wound that never closed properly. The fear of abandonment does not announce itself. It disguises itself as generosity, as flexibility, as being easy to be around, as never asking for too much. And from the outside, it looks like an excellent quality, until the person carrying it collapses under the weight of a lifetime of giving without ever learning how to receive. Machiavelli never wrote about childhood, but he wrote extensively about the patterns that shape how people move through power, and every pattern he identified in the courts of Florence existed first inside someone's family home. Look at how this operates in romantic relationships specifically. Two people begin with balance, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, one person becomes more emotionally visible than the other. They reach first. They apologize faster. They need reassurance more frequently. They make their attachment obvious while the other person's attachment remains ambiguous. And that ambiguity, whether intentional or not, holds power. Not because ambiguity is a strategy, because certainty has already been surrendered on one side. When one person in a relationship is completely certain of their own position and completely uncertain of the other person's, the dynamic has already tilted. And tilted dynamics do not naturally correct themselves. They tend to lean further in the direction they are already leaning. Machiavelli understood that perception controls reality in human relationships more reliably than intention does. You can intend to communicate love. You can intend to demonstrate loyalty. But if the behavior reads as desperation, as need without limit, as attachment without self-respect, the perception overrides the intention every time, because people respond to what they feel from you, not to what you meant. Now take this into the workplace. Watch how this pattern operates without romance attached to it. The employee who needs visible approval from management, who seeks confirmation after every decision, who requires reassurance that their performance is adequate before they can feel stable. That person is not seen as conscientious. They are seen as high maintenance. They are seen as someone whose internal stability depends on external management. And people who need to be managed are managed differently than people who appear to manage themselves. This is not fair. But Machiavelli was not writing about fairness. He was writing about how power actually moves between people. And power moves away from need and towards self-containment with remarkable consistency. The colleague who never seems to need validation but delivers results. The person in the room who speaks less but means more. the one who appears entirely unaffected by whether people approve of them in any given moment. That person commands a different kind of attention, not because they are cold, because they appear whole without external input. And wholeness reads as strength in every social environment humans have ever constructed. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Think about the people you care about most. Have you ever cared so visibly that the caring itself became the problem? Have you ever needed a specific response so badly that the need was visible before the love was? Have you ever confused emotional honesty with emotional overexposure? Because they are not the same thing. Emotional honesty is telling the truth about what you feel when it matters. Emotional overexposure is performing the feeling continuously until the performance becomes the relationship, until the other person is no longer responding to you. They are responding to the pressure you generate when you need something from them. Machiavelli described this dynamic in political terms. The advisor who needed the prince's favor too, obviously, was always the first to fall. Not because he was disloyal, because his need made him predictable. And predictable people, whose behavior can be anticipated and controlled through simple emotional inputs, never hold lasting influence. They hold temporary access until someone with less visible need arrives. Think about the concept of abandonment, because underneath most emotional overexposure is a fear of being left. A fear so old in some people that it predates any conscious memory of where it started. And that fear does something specific to behavior. It makes people overgive, overcommunicate, overexplain, over-apologize. It makes people fill silences that did not need filling, chase responses that were delayed by nothing significant, create emergencies from ordinary distances. And every one of those behaviors, every single act of fear dressed as care, communicates the same message to the people around them. I need you more than I need myself. That message is not intimacy. That message is an invitation to be held hostage by whoever chooses to withhold what you have made essential. This is where Machiavelli's observation becomes most uncomfortable. The people who have the most power in your life are not always the people who love you most. They are the people whose reactions you have made essential to your emotional stability. Whoever controls your mood controls your decisions. Whoever controls your decisions controls your life. And you handed them that control quietly, gradually, through 100 small moments of visible need that you told yourself were just honesty. The question is not whether you care. The question is whether you care from a place of genuine abundance or from a place of fear so deep that the caring has become a survival mechanism disguised as affection. Those two things feel identical from the inside. They produce entirely different realities on the outside. Machiavelli's deeper insight was not that love is weakness. It was that love without self-possession is a position that others will eventually occupy to their advantage and your detriment. Not because people are predators, because power finds the path of least resistance in every human dynamic it moves through. And the person without emotional boundaries is the path of least resistance, every time. Real power is not becoming cold toward the people you love. Real power is caring deeply enough about someone to show up as a whole person rather than a need with a face. Real power is loving without making love a transaction that requires specific outputs to feel valid. Real strength is the person who can feel everything and still remain steady, who can care completely and still remain themselves, who can want someone to stay and still be entirely functional if they leave. That is not detachment. That is the most difficult emotional achievement a human being can reach, it is also the one that changes every relationship around it. Because people feel the difference between someone who wants them and someone who needs them. Want feels like freedom. Need feels like a contract nobody signed. From this moment, you will begin to see it in the people around you. The ones whose caring has become pressure. The ones whose love has become leverage without them knowing. The ones who are slowly losing influence in rooms they believe they control. And you will see it in yourself too, in the old moments, in the memories where the need was louder than the love. And once you see that, you cannot return to being unaware of it. That is the truth that follows you out of this, not what Machiavelli wrote, what you just recognized about yourself.